many of you, I imagine that the last place you'd expect to go on vacation would be to Serbia. There are few places in the world that host such a complicated political history as the countries that made up the former Yugoslavia, and Serbia's might be the most complicated of the bunch, especially in its relationship to our country. The country doesn't exactly bring to mind the notion of relaxing under a palm tree while catching some serious rays. However, I found Serbia and its capital Belgrade, where I spent most of my time, to be outspoken, adventurous, proud, and a bit audacious. Belgrade isn't what I would call a pretty capital, but it contains a gritty energy that makes it unique. In fact, Lonely Planet recently labeled it as the ultimate party city. I never saw that side of the city, but what I did observe was a culture that is dealing with its chaotic past, that is fighting and hoping to attain a brighter future. That means that the city of Belgrade is quite interesting to visit. Socialist blocks are sandwiched between Art Nouveau masterworks, and you can't escape the presence of the Ottoman Empire, whose relics provide a sharp contrast with the legacy of the Habsburgs. I traveled to Serbia for two very different reasons, for two distinct parts of my life. While my father is from Brazil, his family originates in Serbia. It wasn't until about 6 years ago that we re-established a connection with them. When my father was 5, he was kidnapped by his own father, from his mother, and taken on a coffee barge to Serbia, where he lived with his Serbian family for a year until he was returned to Brazil and his mother. He hadn't seen this family in over 45 years, and they'd been searching for the lost Gavazdan ever since. To my surprise, it turns out that they were living in New York City, where I was at the time, and they were artists and filmmakers. In fact, my father's cousin's daughter worked at DreamWorks Animation. So one of the big goals for this trip was to go and meet my family and explore where I really came from. But as an artist, I was going for another reason. I know that I often feel stifled by my limitations and how receptive my audience is. I was curious, what is it like to be a young artist in a country that had only recently escaped the rule of Milosevic and the horrible genocides, Kosovo War, and NATO bombings? So I set out to interview a number of young artists about their lives and aspirations. Was Serbia's art community thriving or dying? That's what I hope to find out. In Belgrade, I would be staying with Lily and Mihailo, my father's relatives. Lily was to serve as my amazing tour guide during my time there, and I could not be more grateful for her help. We headed downtown right away, and on the bus ride through Belgrade, a young man started to talk to me. Turns out his name was Dan. He lived in New York City and was originally from Brazil, which told me that you can travel to the other side of the world and still find yourself. He moved to Belgrade because he loved the people in the city, and said that the difference was that in New York City, no one would talk to you. But in Belgrade, people on the bus would speak out. He was the only one talking, so he proved himself right. He did stress that the economy was tough, though. People with 4 master's degrees were working at McDonald's, and most of the cab drivers held advanced degrees of some sort. The city was in tough times. We got off the bus in Republic Square, joined up with the young Lana and Mila, and went to the Long Live Life exhibition that celebrated post-war life in Belgrade during the 60s and 80s. The exhibition felt very familiar, and it was exciting to enter a culture through its history. If there was one resounding note to take away from the exhibit, it was that life under Tito was a much happier one. Tito created camps for youths to do work projects, and many of them were artistic in nature. Film festivals were incredibly popular, and Tito himself presided over them. We headed out onto the Knez Mihailova, a lively pedestrian boulevard flanked by historical buildings and amazing art galleries. One could spend a whole week exploring some of these galleries. We went to one that featured the works of Velikovic, an artist from the neighboring city of Valjevo. I thought his art was spellbinding, particularly in its morbidity and in the use of the color red. We headed back out to the streets and slowly made our way towards Kalemegdan Citadel, an ancient fortress built by the Austro-Hungarians. This is one of my favorite places in Belgrade. The fortress is now a park for everyone to wander, with restaurants, churches, arts, and benches to rest on. At night it comes to life with young people out to take a stroll are more often than not to have an unfortunate smoke. Lily, Lana, Mila, and I wandered around the fort for several hours, taking in all that it had to offer. Even a wonderful view where the Sava River meets with the Danube. After Kalemegdan, we traveled to Zemun and the Millennium Tower. Zemun used to be a separate town from Belgrade until about 1934 when it joined with the city. One thing it did have, though, was a great view of the Danube. On the ride back home, I talked with Lana and Mila about their education, and they told me all about it. For them, school starts at the age of 7, and every kid is expected to read by the time school starts. This creates a great disparity between those who can already perform, and for those who can't, they often get left behind. They attend elementary until the age of 15, and high school goes until they're about 19. The girls had to go in for retesting that day because the test was stolen and posted online. Turns out that every single school in Serbia has the same exact tests, issued by the government. And if one gets stolen and posted online, then everyone has access to it. It was pretty alarming how different the whole system was. On the second day, Lily took me to meet her brother Mika. Mika is a blues musician who's been playing with his growing band for years in Belgrade. I had a chance to interview him about music in Serbia and what it is like trying to make it as a musician in the city. His band gathered for a special performance for me and sang covers to some amazing blues songs. This recording does them no justice, but I hope you enjoy it nevertheless. Take it away, guys!
Tuesday, just as bad. Oh, they call it stormy Monday. Tuesday, just as bad. Wednesdays once, Thursdays oh so sad.
The eagle fly on Friday, Saturday I go out and play. Fly on Friday, Saturday I go out and play. Sunday I go out to church and fell on my knees and pray.
Lord have mercy.
call it Stormy Monday. But they don't know, they choose me.
I talked with Mika and his band after they finished playing their music, which I hope to put online in the future. They talked to me about their method, who they draw their cues from, and their other inspirations. They stressed the importance of improvisation and feeling the music, and most of all, just listening. Mika has been playing with bands for over 30 years, with groups as small as a traveling duo, all the way up to 8 people. He is drawn to music because he feels that it is the best way to express how he feels. Much of that expression comes from his memories of being a child in a small town, before he moved to Belgrade, where he spent most of his entire life. He loves the city, but feels like the economic crisis they are in has left no support for the arts, and he doesn't see it getting any better anytime soon. Less than 1% of any funding is spent on arts, and unless you're prepared to make some serious compromises, there is no way to live off what you create. Many young artists live in shanty towns and put on amazing art shows and galleries during the week, only to return to living in squalor when they're done. He stressed to me that there's no way to play music for money. You have to play for your soul. He was really worried about finding an audience. With possibly only 3 to 4% of Serbians interested in jazz or blues in a country of over just 7 million, who would listen to the music he creates? This got me thinking a lot about the globalization of art, specifically music. How much great music are we missing out on due to language and audience, as the Western idea of popular music takes over in our global art economy?
Send him home back to me.
I saw so many amazing things in my 2 weeks in Serbia, and this is just a first taste of what I have to offer. I hope that you'll come back later for the longer, more complete version of this video, complete with full interviews, music, art, religious services, and hopefully a bit of humor. Before I go, I thought I'd share 2 observations that I had while I was in Belgrade. The first is about a food I'd want to introduce to you called kajmak. This is kajmak. It's a butter-like spread made from the milk of water buffaloes, or of cows. Kajmak is traditionally made by boiling this milk slowly, and then allowing it to simmer on low heat for about 2 hours. When it's done simmering, the cream that forms on the surface is skimmed and left to chill and ferment for several days. This yields a really high percentage of milk fat, about 60%. And when I say that Serbians put it on everything, I mean they put it on everything. I swear I bought sandwiches where the primary ingredient was kajmak. Here's one example. I went to the Question Mark restaurant, the oldest restaurant in Belgrade that's still operating from its original opening. And I went there for some typical Serbian food. Testicles, guts, livers, etc. And I asked the waiter to surprise me with a popular dish. So, out came my dish. About 3/4 of a pound of hamburger meat sat in a circular tin about half an inch thick, filled to the brim with melted kajmak. That means the meat was floating in the stuff. I was apprehensive, but hey, I'll try anything once. That was a mistake. I didn't move for 2 days. I literally couldn't get out of bed. My body was in shock. No more kajmak. That was the end. This stuff will stop your veins. Another observation that I had came to me when I visited the mausoleum of the leader of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, Josip Broz Tito, commonly referred to just as Tito. Tito died on May 4th, 1980, a beloved figure. He expressed that he wanted to be buried in a flower garden when he died, and so leaders from around the world sent in incredibly exotic and rare flowers to grow around his tombstone. Today, there are only white rocks where the flowers used to be. When Yugoslavia split apart, the tomb was closed to the public, and when the bombing in the late 90s occurred, the flowers were left unattended. Every one of them died, and could never be replaced. At first, I was pretty shaken by this story. I cannot imagine that one of the greatest symbols of our own past leaders will be left to fall into such disarray. It'd be like the Kennedy flame going out, or someone permanently defacing the Lincoln Memorial. Then I thought about it some more. Belgrade was without power for over 3 months, and bombing raids created great fear in the people. Some of those very bombs still lay within the buildings that make up Belgrade. I thought of how quickly the people of Serbia's priorities must have changed, enough that they forgot maintenance of one of their most enduring symbols. The rest of Belgrade is reflective of Tito's tomb. The city is dirty, the grass isn't cut, and people over a certain age have a great number of scars from the cancer caused by radioactivity left over from the bombing. Yet in my time talking to the young people of the country, I left with hope. Times will be tough, and globalization will be rough for the country. But with the recent attempts to gain access to the EU, I'm hoping for the best for Serbia.